Hello and welcome to this mini series. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to learn more about learning to better help your students. So this mini series is called Building Capacity for Metacognitive Conversations. So we'll be explaining what that means in a little bit. In this introductory video, we're going to give you kind of an overview of who the facilitators are, who is funding this wonderful series, the framework in which we are pulling from, and then also what you can expect over the four sessions. So first, who the facilitators are. My name is Lindsay, my pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I am a master's counseling student at CSUN for College Counseling and Student Services. I'm also a success coach at Pasadena City College. I am also a therapist trainee at the LA LGBT Center and a 3CSN intern. 3CSN being the California Community College's Success Network, which is the professional development organization attached to the California Community College Chancellor's Office. I'm also, though she is not here today, in this intro video, we also have another facilitator. Her name is Corinne. Pronouns are she, her, hers, and she is the Associate Professor for Science Education at California State University, Monterey Bay. So shout out to her. You'll see her in other videos. I'm just doing the introductory video to get us started. So you'll see Corinne later. So as we mentioned, this has been funded by a wonderful organization called the California Educational Learning Lab, which is a community practice that supports California State University and California Community College STEM educators. So this is really focusing in on peer educators, part-time faculty, and those two populations in specific in STEM. So science, technology, engineering, and math. But if you're outside of those disciplines or you're not a peer educator or part-time staff, you can stick around for this mini series. This is absolutely something that can be applicable to anyone who's in the education field. So thank you to the California Educational Learning Lab for supporting our work. We are in this particular series really focusing in on the reading apprenticeship framework, which comes from a nonprofit organization called WestEd. WestEd has worked with teachers and researchers over decades at this point, creating this really wonderful framework that helps people to really understand how learning and reading works. And so they have created to this point, you can purchase the second edition of Reading for Understanding, which really focuses on literacy skills in a holistic manner, but it could also be kind of to learning in general. And they're currently, I think, in production of the third edition. So the third edition is available for pre-order. Now, both of these editions are available, I believe, through their website. The second edition for purchase, third edition for pre-order. You can also buy it through Amazon. So definitely, if you really love the work of this mini series or you're interested in this framework, I would really highly encourage you to support WestEd in their efforts to equitize learning. So definitely check them out. I will leave a link to their readingapprenticeship.org website in the Canvas shell as well. So what is the Reading Apprenticeship Framework? I've said it a lot. What is it? So for folks who are new to Reading Apprenticeship, this is the general look of the framework. We pulled it from the Reading for Understanding second edition book. And it talks about how reading, building reading skills, and in some interpretive context, just learning in general, really is a holistic experience and process. So it really looks at both the emotional aspects of learning and the cognitive aspects of learning, with metacognition at the center of both of those. So the Reading Apprenticeship Framework is divided up into 4 dimensions, which you see here, and 2 domains. So the top 2, social and personal, are part of the affective domain. Cognitive and knowledge building are part of the cognitive domain. So again, the emotional parts of learning, the social emotional parts of learning, and the cognitive aspects of learning. So we really want to emphasize that this, again, is a holistic, learning is a holistic experience. So thinking to, we'll kind of go through the dimensions, thinking to the social dimension. The social dimension is really thinking about what is the learning environment that we are in? Are we creating a safe and brave space for students who may not, have had good communal or community-based experiences or in learning in the education system, right? Are we helping to investigate the relationship between literacy and power, or learning and power? Can we share reading processes and problems and solutions? How are we doing that in a social context? You have to think about it. Students are always learning in a social context, right? They're learning in a classroom with 30 to 140 other people. They're learning when they go to learning assistants. Sometimes they are one-to-one, but that's still social. So learning with someone else. So we really are thinking about the wider kind of social aspects of learning with the social dimension, the interpersonal relationships, right, that are created. Now, the personal dimension is kind of narrowing the scope to just the individual. So really thinking about the student's learner or reader identity, right? We're thinking about how they have, or maybe not have, time to develop their metacognitive skills, right? Their ability to learn and read with fluency, to do it for long periods of time, to feel confident in their learning. So the personal dimension is really thinking about, how do I see myself as a learner and a reader, and how does that impact my learning process, right? If I'm not confident, my learning process is going to be completely different than if I go into it confidently, right? Same thing for social dimension, right? In the social context, if I don't feel confident, right, how does that impact my learning process? That's the question we're always asking each of these dimensions. That's the affective domain, or the social emotional components of learning. Now moving down to the bottom, we have the cognitive domain, starting with the cognitive dimension, which again is kind of keeping it broad, keeping it big picture. We're looking at seeing the connections between disciplines. We're seeing the connections, between the material that we're learning, breaking it down, really thinking about the processes that we take in order to determine whether we are understanding material, right? What are the strategies that we take to learning? And how do we adjust different strategies or tools that we're given so that it works for us individually, right? Or it works specifically to a disciplinary context. So for folks in STEM, how do we take traditional reading or learning strategies and tools and really tailor it to the specific discipline that we're in? And then narrowing the scope, we're thinking about knowledge building as this content-specific way that we learn information. So how are we surfacing and building the schema around a specific subject? How are we learning the discourse and the vocabulary for a specific discipline? How are we kind of understanding and creating context for that, right? And so as you can see, kind of the ones on the left-hand side are the wider scope, and the ones on the right-hand side are more narrow scope. So that's the cognitive and knowledge building dimensions of part of the cognitive domain. And you'll see at the center that we have metacognitive conversations, which can be a literal conversation where you're talking with someone else or with a group of other people, but also it's kind of just a generalized term for the routines and strategies that we have in our tool belt that help us to make sense of whatever we're trying to learn. And you'll see that metacognitive conversations touches all dimensions because it impacts the learning process very holistically. We will kind of describe what metacognition is in a little bit, but it's the idea of really analyzing the processes that happen internally, and we can think about how that kind of impacts the social dimension, personal dimension, and that are students even aware to think about how the social or environmental context and how their personal sense of being a learner and reader are impacting their learning? Do they have the tools and strategies, and are they familiar with any of the content that they're trying to learn? And how does that impact their personal process? Some students don't even think about any of those things, and so it really has a major influence on their ability with learning. And you'll see in the backdrop too that there's extensive reading or extensive learning. So reading and learning is obviously something that happens continuously. And the more that we read and learn, using metacognitive conversations, tools, and strategies, routines, the more we become aware of our learning process and what really works for us. So it's important that we continually practice reading and learning in order to become a really good and confident reader and learner. So we've been throwing around the word metacognitive conversations. Let's actually talk about metacognition. So what is metacognition was a research article produced by Michael Martinez in 2006, where in very simple terms, he just said it's thinking about thinking, or the monitoring and controlling of your thoughts. So that's really broad. That means a lot of things. So he kind of broke it down into specific components. The very first one is meta-memory, where he's talking about accurately appraising your current knowledge base. So going into, let's say, that chemistry class, maybe you took chemistry class in high school, right? Or maybe for some of our older adult learners, they took it, more recently in their years. But how much do they remember, and can they accurately appraise that memory that they have of that topic of chemistry? Right? So some students are underconfident. They think they don't remember anything. Some students are overconfident, right? They think they remember everything. And some students can accurately appraise, I remember some things and I don't remember other things, right? So meta memory is really thinking about how much do I remember? What's that knowledge base that I have? Meta comprehension is really thinking about, can I accurately appraise whether I understand that thing? So when I'm learning something brand new, do I know whether I really understand what I'm learning? Or can I determine I understand 60% of it, this other 40% I don't understand, right? And I need help understanding it, right? So meta comprehension is, can they accurately appraise whether they understand it or not? Can they determine whether they get it? And if they don't, do they have the tools to then get the help to help them understand? And meta comprehension, again, there are people who are underconfident, people who are overconfident, and some people who can really accurately determine that comprehension. And both meta memory and meta comprehension, you can have students kind of explain back those different things that they think they do and don't know, and then you can help them with building that accuracy. Another component of metacognition is the problem-solving part, which Martinez described as the pursuit of a goal when the path to the goal is uncertain, or what you do when you don't know what you're doing, in simple terms. So problem-solving is the tools and strategies that we use when we don't understand the content material, right? What do we do when we don't know? Do we start Googling? Do we start asking a friend? Do we go to the book? Do we go to the professor, right? What are our tools to help us figure out how to actually understand the content when we don't understand it? And finally, metacognition also is critical. So evaluating ideas for the quality and judging whether it makes sense or not. So critical thinking, of course, comes in play in STEM a lot, right? Thinking about, I tried this once, it didn't work out, I need to try it again. What are the next steps I need to take? Maybe someone tells you a fact or tries to describe something, and maybe you're analyzing whether that's true or not, right? Does it make sense in the context of what you know? And sometimes it's also critically looking at what is the history a science too that's being told. So there's a lot of ways that we can judge and evaluate those ideas for their quality, deciding whether it makes sense or not. And if it doesn't, again, maybe it's just we need to further build our schema, or maybe we need to acknowledge that it doesn't make sense and find a way out from that. So metacognition, a lot of components happening. There's a lot of components to metacognition. And so that's why metacognitive conversation is really important. Talk a little bit more about why. But in very short terms, metacognition is that ability to analyze the internal processes to determine whether people actually understand what they think they understand, and if they're cognizant of the tools and strategies they're using to understand. So it's the actual action of learning and the strategies and tools that go into it, and the kind of back end are the results that I'm getting what they need to be, and if not, how do I adjust? So going back to metacognitive conversations, which was at the center of the recognition framework, are the strategies and routines that help people engage in metacognition. So again, conversations could be literal. It could be a literal strategy of talking to others to better learn material, or it could be metacognitive journaling, using sentence stems, things that get you thinking about your thinking. So think of it for your students as that strategic learning toolbox, right? What can we do in order to be active and critical learners and readers? So that's a general overview of the frameworks that we're pulling from and really what metacognition and metacognitive conversations are. In terms of the series, this is what you can expect. In session 1, 2, and 3, all of the content will be asynchronous, which means you will be following along in the Canvas shell. There will be videos that correspond to each session, and there will be parts in that where we ask you to pause and do a reflection or a design. So you will be actively participating in the asynchronous model, so that you can kind of get your feet wet in terms of really understanding what we're talking about. And then in session 4, it will be synchronous through Zoom, and you'll be able to get together with the community and share your designs, come with questions and confusions, and just talk with folks about metacognition and metacognitive conversations and how you can really get your students engaged. So in session 1, the asynchronous video will cover metacognitive funnels, metacognitive conversations in the very literal sense, and then metacognitive discussion boards. So there are different modalities for helping your students engage in metacognition. In session 2, we'll have you watching a TED Talk. It is segmented into 3 short kind of bites where you'll be reflecting on metacognitive beliefs or the students' beliefs around learning. Again, kind of going into that meta comprehension, like, can I engage in metacognition if I feel overconfident about what I'm learning and my ability to remember learning? So metacognitive beliefs kind of get really into the social emotional components, the social and personal dimensions, into really thinking about how do we think about ourselves as learners. In session 3, we'll be talking about 3 different styles of metacognitive journaling, so that you can decide what feels best for you or your students. And of course, you can create your own journal types if you'd like, but we'll show you 3. And then session 4, again, you'll bring everything you designed from session 1, 2, and 3 to the session. You could talk about any of them, all of them, ask for suggestions and feedback, ask questions, and really clarify things. So if there are things you don't understand in session 1 through 3, we'll be there as facilitators to so that's what you can expect in this mini series, and all of the kind of frameworks and things that we are pulling from. I hope that this was helpful as a summary to all the remaining modules that you have. But of course, if you have any questions, Corinne and I have in the Canvas shell our contact information, so feel free to email us, and we'll definitely get back to you and try and answer the questions to the best of our ability. So good luck with sessions 1 through 3. We'll see you in session